We would like to welcome all of you to a special broadcast from the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. As you may have already heard, yesterday, April 20th, the Supreme Court of the Russian Federation ruled against Jehovah's Witnesses and decided to liquidate the administrative center of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia and all 395 local religious organizations. In essence, this means that the properties owned by the organization, such as our kingdom halls and our beautiful branch office, have been unjustly confiscated by the Russian government. The ruling goes into effect immediately. Our hearts go out to you, dear brothers and sisters in Russia, but we know that you deeply appreciate the support given to you by the worldwide brotherhood. Just think of how many letters were sent to Russian officials by your fellow worshipers around the world. Contemplate how many prayers and supplications were offered up to Jehovah and will continue to be made in your behalf. Your confidence in Jehovah warms our heart. In just a moment, we will be speaking with Brother Mark Sanderson, who was present in the courtroom when the decision was announced. However, before speaking with him, we know you will be very interested in this account of the 6 days of proceedings that led up to this very disappointing decision. The report includes comments from a delegation of brothers sent by the governing body to meet with officials and to be present for portions of the trial.
Well, the governing body assigned me to come here, not only for the trial that's to take place today, but also to try and see if we could do something to encourage our brothers here on a small scale. When we arrived at the airport, there was a large group of brothers. Many of them were of considerable size. They just kind of shepherded us through the airport, and we were standing there with them for a few minutes, and then one of the brothers suddenly smiled. And he said to me in Russian, "Thank you so much for coming."
Братья из Нью-Йорка, из Лондона трудятся вместе с нами, они ничего не боятся, и это очень укрепляет и дает уверенность.
Видна любовь, видна забота, видно, что братьям не все равно, что происходит с их дорогими духовными братьями и сестрами здесь, в России.
The fundamental question in this case is whether Jehovah's Witnesses are engaged in extremist activity and whether the administrative center is guilty of having organized this extremist activity. When it became known that the Supreme Court of Russia was considering a ban on the worship of Jehovah's Witnesses, embassies from around the world requested information as to what led up to this.
We were successful in getting high-level meetings with a number of different officials at embassies here in Moscow. And it's really been quite impressive to see the reaction of these people in high station. It impressed me that so many of them were eager to want to do something within the limited sphere that they have.
And uniformly, they are just amazed that Jehovah's Witnesses, of all people, are subject to criticism or ban on the basis of being extremist. Now that comes across to them as completely absurd, because if there's one group of people that's known for their neutrality, it is Jehovah's people.
Really now, our eyes are poised toward the trial. We're getting ready to go to the court, and we'll wait and see what's going to happen.
And as we were going to the court, there were about 200 waiting to get into the courtroom. Mostly our brothers, but then some who were just interested in the hearing. We could see the cameramen, the microphones, and the many reporters who were there. It was clear that this was now an international event.
Just when we were in the entranceway, we stepped in. Here was a couple that I had met many years ago in Siberia. And here they had come all the way from Siberia to testify in the hearing, to be witnesses.
We have 4 different brothers representing the administrative center. Each one would take the lead in arguing one motion. The judge would listen to what the brothers had to say, turn to the Ministry of Justice and ask, does the Ministry of Justice have any input on this? The prosecutor would stand, literally say 2 or 3 sentences, sit down, and the judge would say,
Суд, выслушав мнение лиц, участвующих в деле, определил отказать.
The brothers raised 20 motions that they wanted the court to hear. Of those 20 motions, the court granted only 2 of them to see how evidence that would exonerate us was not going to be allowed in the hearing.
After seeing so many of them be dismissed, then you began to see, well, they really weren't going to take any of them seriously.
For example, the brothers were able to show clearly that the congregations that had been liquidated were the result of planting of literature, and that this was on video, and that the Supreme Court would refuse to even see the video.
And that was really our lasting impression, that this was a little bit of a sham. And it was designed to go through the formalities, but you got the sense that the decision had already been taken.
At the hearing, representatives from many embassies were there, and as they listened to the court hear whether local congregations would be allowed to defend themselves, and to hear that the court said no, they were not going to be heard, these embassy representatives were appalled.
And I thought it was quite interesting that when they saw how ridiculous some of the rejection of the motions were at the trial, there was a murmur of laughter in the audience, particularly when the judge cut off our lawyers when they were presenting the evidence of the planted publications. This to them is evidence that it's so absurd that you haven't got the real evidence to bring a charge of extremism, so you plant evidence.
Although we were in the Supreme Court, they don't have so many formalities in the court as perhaps they have in other lands. And so the brothers were allowed to stand up and walk around. It, to me, had the atmosphere of a circuit assembly than being in a courtroom. I think it made the charge that's been brought upon us all the more absurd and ridiculous. Just so many came up and said how grateful they were to feel the support from the governing body, that they were not facing this situation alone. It occurred to me that it was really a small thing, to travel here, but for them it was symbolic. They felt that the governing body was there with them.
Обращения были отклонены. Мы считаем, что этот иск абсолютно не обоснован, он сфальсифицирован, и речь идет просто о гонениях на религиозные
The decision has not been made. We'll have to wait and see. The government had only given us a 6-day visa, and so it was impossible for us to stay any longer. So our entire delegation, of course, with the exception of Brother Colin, we all had to leave the next day. But we had in our mind that we were going to go and strengthen them, but as is always the case, I think we were the ones who came away even more strengthened in our own faith.
One 10-year-old wrote this note to the visiting delegation. Thank you for coming to support us and for your ministry. Sasha, 10 years old, Moscow. As we were leaving and saying goodbye to these brothers, there was not a dry eye among us. They were hugging Brother Sanderson and telling him, this is the spiritual high point of my life. Something occurred in day 2 that was unexpected and surprising to us.
Interestingly, the judge became very active, and he began to really question Ministry of Justice.
Why are you bringing this case? What evidence do you have that they are engaged in extremist activities?
Личные убеждения граждан лицом защищенного
Скажите, а у граждан будет существовать опасность, что окажется какая-нибудь книга, которая в реестре экстремистских материалов одного гражданина соберутся вместе, начнут читать эту книгу вслух? Нет ли угрозы, что они будут совершать уже уголовное правонарушение, такие граждане?
если эти граждане объединятся для того, чтобы почитать книжку экстремистского содержания.
Вы же сами сказали, что религиозные группы останутся.
Да, но при этом не дается право изучать, собственно,
А по факту станут изучать. Будут совершать преступления тоже или нет? Как с правами верующих граждан?
The third day of the hearing reminded us of Matthew 10:18.
And you will be brought before governors and kings for my sake. But then what's the reason? It says, for a witness to them and the nations.
The international community worldwide has now heard the testimony of 6 Jehovah's Witnesses, clearly, cogently, convincingly explaining to the court that we are law-abiding, peaceful citizens, the farthest thing from extremists. For example, one longtime member of Jehovah's Witnesses, Vasily Kalin, explained to the judge that as a child, he had been forced into exile with his parents and was forced to live in Siberia for years.
Везли нас в грязных товарных вагонах более 20 суток. В нечеловеческих условиях, каких обычно перевозят скот. Но для меня было интересным одно обстоятельство этого дела. Мои родители, а также любой из свидетелей Иеговы мог избежать этой участи. Нужно сделать было всего лишь маленькое дело – отказаться от веры, подписать документ о причине. Интересно, что если ты преступник, и поэтому ты подлежишь суровому наказанию, навряд ли кому-то предоставится такая возможность. Но такая возможность была предоставлена свидетелям Иеговы, и лишь только потому, что они не являлись преступниками. Сегодня ничего не изменилось.
Decades later, he was exonerated and cleared of all charges against him. In Russia, he's considered or referred to as a rehabilitated person, meaning that the charges against him have now been expunged.
And now, at this point in his life, they're saying he's an extremist. Anyone could see that the same efforts that had been made so long ago to try to hunt down and wipe out Jehovah's Witnesses were just reappearing now at this particular time. I was texting with one of the brothers at the Russia branch, asking how things were going. And he says, wow, they just announced that the court has been suspended until Wednesday, April 12th, the day after the memorial. And we were all we could hardly believe it, that the court is ending on a Friday, but being postponed until Wednesday. How wonderful.
Мы все ликовали, потому что мы поняли, что мы сможем вечерю провести спокойно до решения суда. Это было ответом на наши молитвы. В четвертый день выступали наши свидетели. Это наши братья и сестры, у которых есть научная степень. Они рассказали о том, как Библия помогла им изменить свою жизнь к лучшему, что они могут совмещать научную работу с религиозной деятельностью. И на этом фоне потом выступали свидетели со стороны Министерства юстиции, которые пытались убедить суд, что свидетели Иеговы отрицают высшее образование, что они все работают на низкооплачиваемой работе и что все они рабы какого-то теократического государства.
We had an adjournment up till April the 19th. That gives the Brotherhood in Russia the opportunity to attend the special talk. And that special talk is all about peace, how to cultivate peace in an angry world.
So we really hope to be in the courtroom with our brothers at the time when the decision is issued. Well, even though it would seem almost impossible, that we could get a visa to return to Russia. Basically, we would have to make application from Kazakhstan. If Jehovah wills and we're able to get the visa, then Tuesday evening I'll return to Russia, and then on Wednesday morning we will be in the court. Brothers were hugging each other. At lunchtime, everybody was sharing their sandwiches with each other. The atmosphere of joy and love was unforgettable. The judge began to go through all of the evidence. And so there were 43 volumes of evidence that had been brought forth in the trial, either by the Ministry of Justice or by our attorneys. And so every one of those volumes had to be reviewed. And so it was kind of a long process. Our attorneys were able to ask the Ministry of Justice, where is the evidence that funding from the administrative center was used for any improper activities? And so the brothers came back, well, tell me how much money, how many rubles, how many kopecks were spent, to fund this improper activity? And we don't have any information like that.
Мы уверены, что уже сейчас мы выиграли этот суд, даже до решения суда. Мы выиграли его духовно. Я думаю, что в истории народа Бога в России этот суд был пиком интереса и популярности среди населения нашей страны. Никогда прежде пресса, общественные деятели, в целом люди не интересовались свидетелями Иеговы в такой степени.
Оглашается результативная часть решения Суда Российской Федерации города Москва решил. Административное правовое заявление Министерства юстиции Российской Федерации удовлетворить. Ликвидировать религиозную организацию Управленческий центр свидетелей Иеговы в России и входящие в ее структуру местные религиозные организации. Обратить имущество ликвидируемой религиозной организации, оставшейся после удовлетворения требований кредиторов, в собственность Российской Федерации. Решение суда об удовлетворении подлежит немедленному исполнению.
In fact, it was quite a surprise to me that one single judge could deliberate on 6 days of evidence and within an hour come back and ban a religion from practicing its faith. When one part of the body suffers, we all suffer. And that would be the feeling throughout the world, I'm sure. We will allow Jehovah, our God, to correct the injustices. We will continue to be peaceable with all men. We will never return evil for evil to anybody.
We have Brother Mark Sanderson of the governing body tied in with us, and we're so happy to have you with us, Mark. And first, we'd just like to thank you very much for making the trip to Russia, Moscow, to be with the brothers during this critical time. And we heard so many comments about how much the brothers appreciated having you there with them.
Oh, thank you so much, Steve. To stand unitedly with our brothers in Russia in that courtroom when they were facing such a vicious attack on their worship from the devil was a tremendous privilege. I have to say, in all my years in serving Jehovah, I don't think I ever felt so proud to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses as when I was standing in that courtroom.
Very encouraging, Mark. But tell us, please, a little more about what was the reaction of the brothers when they heard this negative decision.
Well, Steve, to understand their reaction, I think we have to just kind of recap with what's been happening, because for the last couple of days, there has been such a joyful spirit in the courtroom. The brothers and sisters have been walking around, greeting one another, taking photographs, hugging one another. There's just been this tremendous joyful feeling within this courtroom. And so then, just before the decision was given, we heard the closing statements from our 4 attorneys and also from Brother Sergei Cherepanov and Brother Vasily Kalin, who are both on the branch committee in Russia. And, these brothers made such powerful statements. Their arguments were so compelling that, we all felt just very pumped up by what they said. And then one of the statements that several of these brothers made was that really we're not really standing before the Russian Supreme Court, but really the great judge of the universe, Jehovah, is the one who's judging all matters. And they reminded everyone in that courtroom that everyone is going to have to stand before the judgment seat of God. And when we heard that, we all just felt so inspired, by those comments. Well, then, after a few moments, when the judge actually issued his decision, and the brothers and sisters heard that it was negative, it was just totally silent in the courtroom. There was no outcry, there was no comment. Some of the brothers shook their head. I think we were just all in total disbelief that the judge could issue such an unjust decision after hearing these tremendous arguments from our brothers. But I have to say, although we were stunned by the unjust decision, there was no hint in that courtroom that our brothers are backing down, that they're cowering, or that they're going to give up their service to Jehovah. In fact, you could see that they were even strengthened by this decision to go on serving Jehovah faithfully under their new circumstances.
Those comments, Mark, are so heartening to us to hear. But even though there was a negative decision, how would you say that a great shout of praise has gone up to Jehovah's name?
Steve, I just keep coming back to what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10 and verse 18. He said that we would be brought before kings and governors for a witness to them and to the nations. Well, that's exactly what's happened here. We have been brought before kings and governors, but what a tremendous witness has been given to them and to the nations. For example, we did this letter writing campaign. Our brothers participated all around the world. And then the news media caught on to that, and many newspapers and other media outlets reported on this tremendous effort to write letters to the officials of the Russian government. Then the delegation that was sent by the governing body to Moscow, we were able to meet with 3 different ambassadors from the largest countries on this earth. And these ambassadors, who are so difficult to meet with, welcomed us in. They listened to us patiently, and they showed that they had a very deep respect for Jehovah's Witnesses, being very familiar with our work, and really wanting to do things to help Jehovah's people. It was wonderful. And then consider all the media coverage that's been taking place on the court case day after day after day. And now we have a decision. And so now this court decision is going to be publicized by the media all over the world again. And still to come, we have our appeals that are going to be made in the Russian Supreme Court, in the European Court of Human Rights, with the Human Rights Commission. All of this is going to result in more publicity. And in the end, really, what can we say? Well, people who know Jehovah's Witnesses, people who have Jehovah's Witnesses as their neighbors, as their workmates, as their schoolmates, who really know who we are, when they hear these reports, they are going to immediately recognize that these charges are ridiculous and absurd, and they are perhaps even going to want to ask questions and perhaps even become interested in the truth. So even through this negative decision, Jehovah's name is being exalted and glorified in all the earth.
That is so wonderful, Brother Sanderson, what you've expressed. And one thing that we're just so happy about is that the brothers were able to celebrate the memorial of Christ's death before the negative decision was rendered. I know many of us, I was praying and others were praying, if it be Jehovah's will. And of course, we always want His will to take place, but if it was His will, that at least they could celebrate the memorial in peace. And so that happened, and we're so happy.
Yes, that was my prayer too. And really, when the decision was made to adjourn the court until the day after the memorial, we really had to see Jehovah's hand in it, because across Russia, now that all the reports have come in, we understand that only in 3 cases did the police come to a location where the memorial was being celebrated, but even in those cases, they did not attempt to disturb the occasion. So we can say that our brothers were able to celebrate the memorial all across Russia in peace. And of course, even with the special talk, because again, the court adjourned, the special talk was also held across Russia in peace. And so in a mighty way, Jehovah stood by his people and allowed them to have these 2 very important spiritual occasions before this decision.
We thank Jehovah for that blessing, and we thank you, Mark, for those very encouraging comments, and we thank you again for representing the governing body there in Russia and supporting the brothers. We really appreciate it, and please travel home safely.
Thank you so much, Steve. It was such a wonderful privilege to be able to be in Russia with our dear brothers at this historic moment. I look forward to seeing you when I return.
And we would like to thank all of you for your support. You, dear brothers and sisters, gave heartfelt prayers. You willingly supported the letter writing campaign. For some of you, sending a letter to 1 or more of the 6 Russian officials came at a great expense. We commend you for your strong love for your brothers in Russia and for your loyalty to Jehovah's organization. But does the Supreme Court's decision against us mean that the letter writing campaign failed? Or that Jehovah did not hear our prayers? Absolutely not. It simply means that we have yet to see how Jehovah will maneuver events in harmony with his will. In the meantime, we are confident that our dear brothers and sisters in Russia will remain steadfast, and that Psalm 112, 7 and 8 will be true of them. There it says of Jehovah's righteous one, he will not fear bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting in Jehovah. His heart is unshakable. He is not afraid. In the end, he will look in triumph on his adversaries. As long as we're still living in this old system, as we have seen in Russia and many other lands, we can expect persecution for simply wanting to worship Jehovah in peace. But do we need to fear such persecution? No. Jesus Christ and the heavenly armies are ready to take the lead in defending Jehovah's people. We can rest assured that according to Isaiah 54:17, no weapon formed against us will have any success. And why? Because Jehovah is on our side. May we all continue to pray for our dear brothers and sisters in Russia, whom we love very much. This is JW Broadcasting from the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses.